Today on the podcast, we have Jennifer Gibson, who is a fractional COO with years of experience in the startup world, specifically niching into health tech. We went through her entire LinkedIn, talked about all the projects she's worked on, what the outcomes were, and we chatted about what the future looks like for healthcare. Hope you enjoy. With a lot of guests, they have like a LinkedIn that's very specific, but your LinkedIn there's so much stuff on it. I don't even know where to start. We'll start at the beginning with Vita Health. Like, I always love hearing these like startup stories. What was it like being the first employee of a startup?
It was wild. It was my first experience in technology, so it was like a big learning curve for me there. But I joined with four very seasoned founders, and I think that made all the difference. These were people that were serial entrepreneurs. We had a medical doctor as one of the founders. So, in terms of expertise, it was very deep on each of those founders' side, and they all came together to build. The being the first employee gives you this incredible opportunity to really see all the different ways you can make impact. So you may have worked in one specific category for your whole career before that, and you get into a startup and you realize, like, hey, there's no marketing person yet, or like, we don't really have like an account manager yet or an implementation
Yeah.
specialist. And so it really allows you to stretch your skill set and be able to take on opportunities that you wouldn't ever get to do in a larger company. And it was the first place that I started working in the product space and realized how much I loved that. Like, how do we decide what we're going to build for the user? And how do we make sure that it's a feature that is going to be helpful for them? And how do we make really hard decisions when we are low on cash and we're low on people and we have a certain amount of time and ability to build, um, and just taught me how to ruthlessly prioritize what you're going to build for the direction of the company. And that is a skill set that you particularly learn in those early stage companies where you have no choice but to be very focused and driven to make sure the company continues to the next stage.
Yeah, that's definitely the true startup experience. And I know that it did scale to quite a few coaches. Like, what
Mhm.
was that like scaling?
Yeah, it was really fun. Like, I always say health coaches are actually like the best team to manage because they all have been trained in like great communication. That's like what their job is in their role. And it really started off with like building out teams. So, what teams would we have focus in what areas, whether we were going to focus in, by region. When we first started, we were under the theory that we thought people would want to connect to their health coach 24/7.
Mm,
So, my first challenge coming in on the hiring side was hiring health coaches that were willing to work that like overnight shift. And that was tricky to find people that would do that. And we pretty quickly evolved that to what actually the users wanted, which was to have a strong relationship with a health coach that was a good match in the beginning. But yeah, the scaling process was a great like opportunity for me to understand how to do that. Taking all the hiring and training, understanding like what qualities are you looking for, what can you automate, how can you outsource it, what are you comfortable outsourcing to other people to do, and what's that funnel looking like for hiring? Because when I left, we had over 100 health coaches nationwide, and so it was a big process of scaling, making sure that we had good diversity on the team, that we had people that were, responsible and going to show up, and everyone that we hired was remote, and that was pretty
yeah.
new back then. That was like the
Yeah.
first,
That's
that was
2014. Yeah.
right, 2014, long before COVID. So
Yeah.
we're one of the early companies figuring out like how do you manage remote teams and make sure that the quality is high and that you're hiring people that are um, who you want to be hiring while not ever getting to spend any time with them in person. So, yeah, it was a really fantastic experience. And it certainly helped then when COVID did hit a few years later, when I was at Apple and had to move all my teams remote, it felt like I had a bit of an advantage there because
You
I
were
had,
like, I know.
or yeah.
So then you made the switch to Apple from this startup, Vita Health. What's that like to switch from this sort of startup environment into the more rigid corporate environment of an existing company?
Yeah, it was a big switch, but incredibly exciting, of course, getting to work at, the arguably the best company in the world was just an incredible opportunity. And a couple of experiences my first week there really stand out to me. Like one, when I was at Vita Health, of course, being an early stage company, even through scale that we got to, you have a lot of view into the financials to see how well things are going, like where you're at with budgets. A lot of my responsibility was around the financial side of keeping a department running. And one of my first conversations at Apple, I was asking a lot of questions about budget and finances and money. And the person I was talking to was like, just don't worry about that for now, Jen. Like focus on this other like operational stuff. And I just remember having a moment like, oh wow, that's different. My focus is not on the revenue side of things. That's not what what that job entailed. And that was a surprise and also kind of nice to have that break from that. Um, yeah, and the other experience, when I got there was I went to go meet a colleague at one of the health clinics at Apple's main campus in Cupertino, the big spaceship.
I
I
was going to
remember
ask you about that. That was my
yeah,
next question.
yeah, it was really surreal. I took a shuttle over. I got one of the bikes that was at the front of the spaceship, like rode around the spaceship out to the clinic, and it's just the most beautiful, amazing campus. And I just remember thinking about how it felt like I was in an episode of what was the show, Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley. Yeah.
And just really great. And the caliber of people that work there is incredible. They attract people with such high levels of talent, such high levels of drive, so much polish. It was a great learning experience for me in terms of how do I take everything I've learned from like a scrappy startup and now be able to develop more of an executive presence and really understand how I can message things more clearly and concisely. And that is something that Apple is so expert at that runs through the whole organization. That was really very valuable.
Yeah. I've only ever worked in the startup space. So, I'm a young guy and I think this is going to be something that if I ever do transition, I have no idea. Like, I think it would be hard for me because I'm just so used to the startup world where it's whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
It is, yeah, it's fun. Both have their advantages for sure. And actually where I worked was almost like a startup within Apple. So in some ways it felt like we were utilizing those skills because we were building these clinics from from the ground up. These programs were all brand new that we were building. And so there was a lot of building going on there that is a lot faster than what you typically would do in a large company like Apple. But we
Yeah.
saw a lot of the precision and thoughtfulness that comes with Apple, which also amounts to like being slower in a lot of ways because they're very thoughtful about where they move forward, why they move forward, how they make decisions. And so that the velocity is very different than it was at a startup.
So when you're working at Apple, you were a team director. So you're a manager, right? But I notice post Apple, you kind of transition more into like product. Um, so at Lovu Health, I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yep.
You're now the chief product officer. So what was that then? You transitioned it on to product development?
Yeah, so a lot of what I had done in my career had been in the product space without that official title. So I had probably spent as much time in product development and operations, um, both together. And so when I shifted over to Lovu Health, I was really interested in how we were going to create the experience for the user, both on the mobile side. But the other side that I worked a lot on was how do we scale our navigation team, who are, again, remote employees, and we need to give them the technology that they can use to interact with the patients. And also, how do we use some of these like amazing AI tools that we have to be able to automate and make it much more efficient so that the scale is much more possible. So I always think product and operations are so linked together in terms of skill sets for how you figure out a problem, how you solve for it, what's the user experience like. And all of those were things I had done over and over again in my career without that being like an official title. So it felt like a very smooth transition over to something that was more of a chief product officer role where I was, kind of building the app from scratch, understanding the user experience, understanding the challenges. At that organization, we connected with patients who were maternal health patients. And so they were in the middle of pregnancy. And we were focused on patients that were in maternal healthcare deserts that didn't have as easy access to OBGYN care as women in other parts of the country. And so we were monitoring them remotely, which was something we had done a lot at Apple during our different programs for things like hypertension. So these moms got a blood pressure cuff, a scale, and a fetal heart rate monitor that they were able to monitor themselves and their babies between appointments. And so one of the big challenges was how do we make sure that they're collecting the data that we want them to collect? How do we get that data back to the provider so that they have insight into what's going on with the patient when they're not able to make it to a visit? And then how do we make the user experience good and solid so that they want to continue to take their measurements and that they understand the reasoning behind why we're asking them to take those measurements through time? And so all those felt like familiar problems to solve that I had done before. And this way, I just worked a lot more closely with the engineering team on what the features looked like and were being built.
Yeah, and I'm sure that in your career path, you definitely saw AI kind of appear out of nowhere and then start to really change the way that you and your teams operate. Like, do you have any sort of advice with AI or secret sauce with AI that you could share from your experience?
Um, I would say people just need to get very comfortable with the fact that AI is here and it is going to become a very fundamental component of the way any company is built going forward. I talk to a lot of executives in the work that I do, and the way people have built incredible careers that they've had, it's all different now. Like they have to be open to changing the way that they plan to do work going forward. It is going to be the most fundamental shift of our generation is how AI is incorporated into the workspace. And early stage companies have an advantage in a lot of ways because they are building AI native right from the beginning. They understand it, they can build it right into their foundations of their company. And for companies that are more legacy, that have been around longer, they're going to have to really rethink about how they're going to compete with these young early stage companies that have the advantage of being able to scale much faster at a much lower cost. And a lot of the way they're going to have to do that is moving back to rebuilding their whole foundation. And I think that's
Yeah.
really startling to people when we have those discussions. But it's going to be unlike anything I think we're going to see in our lifetime. Is this these next few years of what that competition is going to look like and how companies are going to stay alive and not become the next blockbuster story that that people are going to use as an example in a few years from now.
Well, imagine this, right? This is such a great story. Imagine like all these doctors are using paper. And then in the early 2000s, you have all these companies, modernizing medicine, Athena, eClinicalWorks. They create all these electronic medical records and they completely push out the paper. They're the innovators, right? Now,
Mhm.
just like you said, AI comes everywhere. They have zero AI, nothing. And because they're so big and so bureaucratic, they just can't innovate fast enough to get AI involved in their systems. Meanwhile, these startups are coming. Here's my AI EMR I built, and
Mhm.
it's crazy. Yeah, it's what's happening right now uh,
Yeah,
in the medical industry. So yeah.
right.
And also, I think it's so important you mentioned as well with and we've had two, you're our second person in the kind of AI med tech space we've had on. And
Mhm.
the first guy we had, Nick, he was kind of doing the same thing as you in a way. It was different, but what they were doing was basically they were training nurse practitioners how to do urology in
Mhm.
rural communities. But then they also had like the doctor that worked in the back end to kind of help them out as well. But yeah, so we can innovate to helping communities through just innovation in tech. I think it's
Right.
super cool.
It is really cool. And yeah, you look at a company like Hippocratic AI and all they've built and these voice agents and how I heard the CEO there talking on a podcast, and one of the examples that came up was, there's a huge wildfire in Southern California, which happens, and you have, 100,000 patients that have asthma or COPD or some other lung condition that you need to check on. The traditional way is you pull all those lists and you have your team, your MAs, your nurses call each person on that list and see, like, do you have medications? Like, are you having symptoms? With something like Hippocratic AI, where you use a voice AI, you can make that call to all 100,000 users in the same 5 minutes. And so
Yeah.
just the scale of being able to collect some of that data and be able to make decisions based on it has completely changed, and companies need to be ready for it and also understand those huge use cases that are going to make such an impact for them on their financials and on their ability to meet the shortage of healthcare workers that we know is coming soon.
And also I want to butt in. You could also use Caesar Health to do those calls instead of Hippocratic AI, and Caesar Health could book them into your EHR and say you will see a doctor on this date, which is crazy.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing. And those
shameless plug.
are, yeah, that's good. I mention that. And those are the kind of cases that that will make a huge difference for healthcare organizations that we haven't been able to see. And then I think when healthcare people see those opportunities, they're always in awe with like what can actually be done through AI. And a lot of it is through getting them more exposure and understanding of what the capabilities are so that they know where it would plug in or how it would help.
Yeah. So now back to your career. Let's go kind of into the present with Wiggle and also some of the other kind of projects you're involved with.
Yeah, so currently I'm a fractional COO for Wiggle, and Wiggle Health is an early stage back pain prevention platform that utilizes an AI-driven platform to monitor people through their wearables, look at their data, and be able to give really personalized guidance on how they can change their movements to be able to prevent back pain in the future. And so it's
Mhm.
different in that a lot of the big organizations that have worked in the musculoskeletal space have looked at people who have already gotten an injury somehow, have already reported back pain, have already reported neck pain. But our CEO is a chiropractor. He's been a chiropractor for 20 years and he's worked in a lot of the big tech companies. And he understands how doing preventative work can really help people from getting to that place of needing to file a claim in the first place. And those claims are incredibly costly. It's $72 billion cost to the self-insured employment in the US for musculoskeletal claims. It's often the number two cost to an organization for that pain. And so we basically took all of his incredible knowledge and things that he has done to support patients over the years and built it into an AI agent that people can utilize and ask questions to. And we can do ergonomic assessments. People can take pictures of their workspace, and our platform will give them recommendations and link them to directly to different tools that they can purchase, or if their company sponsors a certain amount of money that they can use for ergonomic setup, we can link directly into those financials to help get them set up. And so it's just one of the organizations that uses AI really well in how we're building the company. Again, taking the cost that companies spend on ergonomic assessments for employees and meeting all of those legal requirements without the human cost, while also making the experience really helpful and usable for users, where we can look at 8,600 points of data for them over the course of a year and guide them to being able to move better.
What does the Wiggle wearable look like though?
So we are wearable agnostic. We connect all wearables that people already have in place. So
Mm.
everything from your Oura Ring to your Apple Watch to your Whoop, all of those we're able to connect. So we don't preference any specific wearable. And the reason for that is we want to be as applicable to a wide population as possible and be able to take the data from the wearable that somebody already is using and that they're finding helpful.
And then with Gen AI, you're actually the founder, but this is more like of an advisory company from what I understand. I don't know, maybe I got that wrong.
Yep, that's correct. Yeah, I do fractional work and then also advisory for health tech companies, both early stage and mid stage health tech companies. So right now I'm doing some advisory work for another organization that's in the longevity meets oncology and concierge medicine space, and another organization that's on the revenue cycle management space.
Ooh, the the three letters. And
It,
like this is where I have some kind of hard hitting questions for you. So what typically, like when you get involved in a project, like what do you need to advise on out of the door usually? Maybe there isn't a usual, but maybe there is.
Yeah, I mean, I always start with a discovery call with companies because I'm trying to understand what is it that they're already doing, where are they really at, not just where their website says they're at. Like what are you currently doing, and what are the current challenges? So a lot of what I'm doing is kind of leaning into what I've done in product and operations for my whole career of like what are the challenges and the problems and where can I use my skill set to help support. And so often what that looks like is, these are kind of the specific challenges around us being able to scale and move forward, or us not being able to automate in the right way, or we're
Mm,
unsure what features we need to build next in order to create the best user experience. Or a lot of times it's in go to market, like they're unsure what opportunities they're hearing from investors. They need to move into the B2B market, and it's a really hard market to get a foothold into. And so what are some other opportunities that they can start to do in order to scale? And the way companies are setting up contracts now are very different than it was a few years ago. Like how they want to build contracts that are more value based. And so a lot
mm.
of it is discovery, understanding what the issues are, and then being able to write up a proposal based on where I think I'd be able to plug in and help.
Mm.
And I generally will work with companies on very specific um, areas of focus that can be expanded or shifted as priorities change as they do in early stage. But we're generally coming up with like what do we want the results and the end goal to be? What would you like to walk away with in 3 to 6 months that feels very tangible and that's going to really help your organization? And then my job is to create the plan and the strategy for how we do that, and then to execute on it so that we can get there together.
Okay, I got another question for you. If it's like a too general or kind of stupid, you don't have to answer, but how do you sell a B2B health tech product? How do you sell a B2C health tech product?
That's a good question. I mean, that's definitely always the question companies have. The B2C is really hard because your customer acquisition cost is often incredibly high. It's
Mm,
uh, you're competing against a lot of people in the space. You're advertising through social media. A lot of the companies that are doing that, the reason they're doing that is because they haven't been able to shift into B2B or it just isn't a great fit. And so on the B2C side, a lot of it is trying to find your channels for advertisement that are not going to make your customer acquisition cost incredibly high. And you're looking at your funnel. You're making sure like, okay, once we spend that money and we acquire a customer, what is their lifetime value? Like how long are we able to keep them for? And where is that breaking down? Because once you get someone, you don't want to lose them again. So you want to make sure that
mhm.
you are going to get revenue from that person over a longer period of time, which is where places like 23andMe hit issues, is because they charged it. It was a one-time fee, and then oftentimes they had a hard time with recurring revenue. So
Yeah.
the companies kind of on the consumer side, that's a discussion we have a lot, is like, what is your ongoing service that you can offer to people? And how can you build those growth loops right into your product so that every time somebody uses your product, other people know that they're using your product and it's free advertisement for you.
Yeah.
um, on the B2B side, it's tricky because employers are a little burnt out, especially in the health tech space, of having to manage multiple single condition vendors. It's challenging for them. They haven't seen a big turnaround on investment in terms of how many people have been able to show real outcomes.
Mm,
And because of the way that contracts have been set up on the B2B side, a lot of those organizations are paying for people that are using the product, which means that you're at a little bit of a disadvantage with them, is they don't have an incentive to advertise your product to their population. And so
mm.
then discovery is that people just happen upon it. Oftentimes, the adoption rate is around 3 to 4% for a platform that's available for an employee population. And so, really, on the B2B side, what I work a lot with founders on is what are some other creative solutions to help get into that market that aren't going directly to, the door of these big tech companies and asking Google to like look at your product, which are long sales cycles. Oftentimes, it's brokers. Like how can you get into benefits brokers? A lot of companies are using them. How do you go through and do partnerships or look at white labeling your app? What are some other options that might get you the scale that you're looking for through a B2B contract without having to go in and sign each individual company? I also I was just speaking at JP Morgan, was that the week before last, on how to move from pilot to a long-term contract. And one of the things I was telling the audience there was pilot is a dirty word in health tech now. If you're trying to sell, like, don't try and sell a pilot, try and sell a phased rollout, because a pilot indicates it's a clear beginning and end to it, that they're then going to evaluate and decide whether they're going to move forward. Your better option is to go to a rollout, start in a small population, of your user base at one location or two locations, and then do the evaluation as you're continuing to enroll, and have very clear, defined criteria for what is going to allow you to move forward on that contract once you move through that first phase.
Yeah, and as you say that, I'm flashing my sales career is flashing through my eyes. Yeah, I learned the same thing super early on. To call something a pilot was very dangerous, but I learned how to reframe it in a way, which was that it is kind of a pilot, but not for the product. It's a pilot for whatever you are. So I'll
Mhm.
be like, oh, the product's there, but I just want your opinion of it effectively. So it kind
Yeah.
of reframes it away from that. I learned that the hard way early on. So,
Yeah, and you want the people that you're going into business with to feel like you're in a partnership. Like, okay, we
oh
are
yeah,
together, we're growing together, we are willing to make updates and adjustments based on what's working well for your population within reason. And that's important to have that. And it's also important to realize that that person who's like your champion within the company is just one of the stakeholders who's going to make the decision about whether your organization's moving forward. So the way you set up that initial phase needs to look at what every stakeholder you expect to need to say yes to, that they're going to get what they need in order to feel comfortable with moving forward, and not just the person who's like your greatest champion in the company.
and that's the great thing about being in the startup space. It's actually funny. One of our clients, I've never met the doctor. I connect with him on LinkedIn, but I've never met him. I only speak through his staff, but I always laugh like that's the guy I'm serving, and I've never spoken to him in my life. But I know who I'm
Yeah.
working for. So
Right. You're like, they're the executive sponsor. They're going to be the final yes.
yeah.
So I better make sure that whatever it is that's going to make them say yes is what I'm delivering on.
And that's what's so nice about being a startup is you can really deliver, especially for your first clients. Definitely.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you think that is worth chatting about on this podcast?
I would just emphasize that I think companies like Caesar Health and companies that are really helping to push the space forward on AI-driven infrastructure are going to be really important for companies going forward as they think about how they're going to innovate and survive and compete against other organizations that are being built from the ground up right now. And there is going to be no legacy company that is not going to have to go through and make huge changes. It's coming, and if they don't turn their eyes towards it and think about how they're going to do it and include it in their strategy and be thoughtful about what they're incorporating, then they're going to get antiquated quickly,
Yeah.
and people are away from the org. So it's not going to be as slow as it was when big shifts came around like the internet. This one's going to move faster, and so that means
Yeah.
move faster on their strategy.
And where can people find you? You have the LinkedIn. I have it open
It's
here.
great. I love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty avid poster on LinkedIn about things that AI and health tech is one of the main topics I post about, and I also post about leadership. You can find me at genaiadvisory.com. That's my email for my advisory. I also have a webpage, genaiadvisory.com. So those are great ways to find me.
Yeah. And thank you so much.